The minigun and the boom bow have the best and more realistic adaptive trigger responses, but unfortunately both of them are currently vaulted. What's up guys, today we're gonna test the PS5 controller on every single weapon type in Fortnite. From melee weapons to small pistols to large rocket launchers, vehicle weapons, and even special Marvel abilities. The DualSense controller has two main features when using weapons. One, as you press the trigger, there is an adaptive response or resistance from the triggers. And two, you get haptic feedback or rumble based on the fire rate of the weapon. Let's get started with the harvesting tool. In this case, there is no adaptive trigger function. You can press the trigger freely. You will, however, get a haptic response or rumble, the same as the PS4 controller. Now this behavior is the same with other melee weapons like the Infinity Blade. With items you throw like grenades, there is no adaptive trigger function, and in this case, no rumble either. I guess all of that does make sense. The adaptive triggers are meant for range weapons where you have a trigger, sort of like this basic pistol. Here you can only move the trigger a few millimeters in this dead zone. Pressing it any further means you gotta fight against some resistance. Once pressed, the weapon fires, you get haptic feedback, and the resistance disappears. This basically repeats every shot. The Revolver behaves the same when it comes to the adaptive triggers, but the haptic feedback is just slightly a bit stronger and longer. The pump shotgun also behaves like a revolver. The combat shotgun is similar in terms of the adaptive trigger response. The haptic feedback is, however, shorter but more frequent as you fire at a faster rate. A single shot rifle like this also behaves the same as shotguns. I guess the haptic feedback is slightly weaker but more frequent with this faster fire rate. The Harpoon Gun, again, very similar feeling to those other single shot weapons. A bolt action sniper rifle is also very similar to these other single shot weapons. And the suppressed sniper rifle is really no different either. All Marvel superhero powers also support adaptive triggers. The response, however, isn't a whole lot different than firing a pistol. Moving on to semi-auto weapons like this compact SMG. Here the adaptive triggers behave differently than single-shot weapons. You now get a very slight constant resistance from the trigger as the weapon is being automatically fired. And the haptic feedback follows the same rhythm as the fire rate of each weapon. Other SMGs like the tactical and suppressed SMG have identical adaptive triggers. But of course the haptic feedback is slightly different and based on the rhythm of how the weapon fires. The LMG has the same adaptive trigger response, but a very high intensity haptic feedback because of its high fire rate. Now we'll go through the assault rifles, but they're no different than the SMGs either when it comes to adaptive triggers. It's just the haptic feedback is different based on the rate of fire. The Stark Industries energy rifle also behaves the same way as those other semi-auto weapons. The Burst Assault Rifle feels quite different, and it's because of the haptic vibrations, which come in these high intensity bursts, just like the weapon. Now, I've been saying the same adaptive triggers for a while, so testing these next two weapons was refreshing. First up is a minigun, and the adaptive trigger response here is fairly unique. You have the initial dead zone, and then you press against resistance to fire. That resistance keeps fighting back at a very high strength, almost like a real minigun. The haptic feedback is of course also high intensity because of the high fire rate. The boom bow was another neat test. You get this constant resistance as you hold down the trigger, and it's really mimicking how a real bow is fired. Now moving on to launchers, although they might cause high destructions, their adaptive response is like pistols and shotguns. The Bandage Bazooka has the same feeling as a grenade launcher. And even the grenade launcher on boats has the same response. The rocket launcher is also no different than other single shot weapons. Pumpkin launcher behaves the same way. The quad launcher has the same adaptive trigger response, but the haptic feedback is slightly longer in length. So that's it. That's how the adaptive triggers and haptic feedback currently work in Fortnite. I gotta say, there isn't a whole lot of variety here. We're talking maybe 4 to 5 different adaptive trigger variations. The minigun and the boom bow have the best and more realistic adaptive trigger responses, but unfortunately both of them are currently vaulted. Hopefully we get some future updates from Epic to improve these functions. If you enjoy this content, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe to the channel because there's a ton of next gen content coming your way.